It is because you sacrificed your life by hanging on the cross that we can no longer be slaves of fear. Father, there's no way we could even come close to thanking you for that. But we pray, Father, that you would fill our hearts so that we have the desire and the longing to serve you. Father, I just pray and ask that you would be with each and every one of the people that are in this room today. Be with their families, Father. Draw close to them, Lord Jesus. Father, there are people here that are in the valley that maybe don't see a way out. And I just pray, Father, that you would just come close to them. Let them know, Father, you are bigger and stronger than what they're going through. That in you they have hope. They can have joy and peace. I pray, Father, that you would draw near to those that are sick, that are hurting emotionally, physically. You are the Almighty Physician, Father. We praise your holy name. Thank you for loving us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Today's scripture is found in Genesis 32. 9-12. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me, the mothers, with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude.
Happy Sabbath, everybody. It's a good day today because we get to be together. We haven't been together for the last 2 weeks because we had camp meeting. And if you're a visitor, camp meeting is this, how do I put it? It's this weird thing we do where we all get together and we camp out together for a week because I guess we like each other or something. So, but it's like all the churches in the Western Washington area. We get together and it's a lot of fun. I was in the junior 10, so I was dealing with 10 to 12-year-old kids. And I don't remember who I was telling it to, but 10 to 12-year-olds are probably some of the best age groups to work with especially like in a programmatic setting, because you don't have to like put a ton of effort into like micromanaging their lives. You don't have to tell them to like to put their shoes on or anything. But on the other side of it, like they still get excited about life. And once you get to about 13, 14, you start being, I'm too cool for everything, you know. You get there, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is a lot harder, especially as a pastor working with them. So these 10 to 12-year-old kids, like I'm used to just being like, how's everybody doing today? And they're all like, we're awesome. So I expect that of you today. No, I'm just kidding. But it's a good day. We're in summer now, so I know for some of us, life is kind of in this weird, like, chill place. Then for others of us, it's like nothing has changed. The weirdest thing coming out of college, I guess this is my second year out of college, my second summer out of college. What's weird about it is that it's not really a break, and yet it kind of weirdly is. Like, it's still that for the rest of the world. When you're in college, it's like it's a break. I don't have school. Even work is a break from school. But now that I'm out, I'm like, it never stops, but it definitely slows down. And so there's this, summer is this weird enigma to me still. I'm not sure how to deal with it, but it's okay, Denali. You can come get her. No, you're not going to come up? That's okay. It's okay. You know, can I just say this real quick? This reminds me of something. That Jesus, he says, bring the little children unto me. And I think one of the coolest things about Jesus is that he always looked out for those who were weaker than the people around him. And we get to be in this church today. She's fast too. We get to be in this church today. Where are you going? What's the plan? Just back there. We get to be in this church today. Oh, Bernie's going. Down the other side. We get to be in this church today working with, visiting with each other, but with the intention of going out into the world for the least of these. This isn't a place where we come together so we can get our fill of Jesus and then be done. This is a place where we come together so that we can be refilled and then go. If we haven't emptied our cup in our week, then we come and we're just kind of pouring more into a cup that's already full, right? And it's kind of useless. It's a useless process. So that's what we're here for. And today, we're not doing a series today. Next week, we're going to start a series called Silence, and it's about when it feels like God is silent in our lives. And we're going to do two weeks of that. But today, I've just been kind of processing through something in my own life, and there was something that happened a couple months ago that started all of this. So we'll go through that. But it's about redirection and being redirected by God. So let's process through that today and together. And let's pray. Lord, I just thank you so much for who you are. You are a God that loves us so much, takes us where we're at, doesn't care at all about where we've been, doesn't care about all the mistakes we've made, and you take us exactly where we're at. And I thank you for that, God, because for those of us, we have varying issues, we have varying things that we're dealing with, and yet you somehow meet us all where we're at. And you seek for us to have a better life. You seek for us to get better, but what we've done and where we are has no bearing on how much you love us. And so I thank you for that. And in this moment, God, as we talk about being redirected and about your work in our lives, I just pray that you would work through me. You would speak through me, that these words would be your words, and that your Spirit would be making connections that I can't make. So thank you so much, Lord. In your name, amen. This sounds like this is a really dumb question because I know the answer for everybody, but I'm just going to ask it. Have you ever been in a circumstance let me say this differently. Have you ever expected something to go a certain way and then it went completely the opposite direction? And that's why I say it's a dumb question, because I literally know that for every person's life, if you've gone through life where everything has gone the way you've expected it, please, you can preach next week and tell us your secret, because life is so weird, because we start off in so many ways. We start expecting something or thinking this is the path, this is the way we're going, and then it just veers off to the left or to the right, and it just doesn't make any sense. It happens all the time. You're driving to work, and all of a sudden there's construction on your route, and you got to take a different path. This happens all the time. You make plans with someone, and you always have that one friend that is just super bad at keeping plans. They either come 30 minutes late, or they're just like, hey, something crazy happened and I got to cancel on you. So you got to weave through that. This happened to me the other day. You start a project, and then you have your steps figured out, and then about 2 steps in, you realize that everything is going to have to change. I was working in my shed trying to put together something to put all my tools on. I'm like, oh man, I didn't think about the dimension. All of a sudden, everything changes. Yesterday, I went to mow the lawn. I had some free time in the afternoon, and so I went to mow the lawn, and I had this plan. I was going to do all 4 different things. And then I get out there, and I forgot I broke the pull cord on the lawnmower last week. So now I have to fix that. So, of course, that didn't get done. And that's just, those are kind of the humorous change of plans that we have. But these redirections that happen to us, sometimes they're not always just inconveniences. Sometimes we get redirected from things because they're dangerous. They're dangerous to us. You see it in our lives. You see how we seek to direct people on the right path, but then we get off, and what prison is and jail and all this stuff is trying to get you redirected. Hopefully, that's kind of the hopeful idea, is redirecting us back into the path. But the whole thing that started this, actually, before I get there, we have a German Shepherd puppy, 6 months old, approximately now, right? So 5 months, 5, 6. Anyways, he's getting big. This dog has a one-track mind. And we have our hallway that on the left is our bathroom, and then at the end of the hallway is our master bedroom. This dog, he'll just kind of start walking, and German Shepherds have this funny lope. My wife described them. They look like they're about to trip every single time. No, they look like they're limping. That's what it is. And so he'll kind of start walking towards the bathroom, and I know that as soon as he gets into the bathroom, he's going to go straight for the toilet or the trash can. And when he gets in the trash can, it's hilarious. He knows he's not supposed to. He goes, grabs something, and then he books it out of there, hoping that we won't notice what just happened. So if I see him going towards the bathroom, and I'm kind of in the hallway already, I'll go up to him, and as he starts to dive into the bathroom, I'll just kind of put my hand on his shoulder and on his butt, and I'll just move him. And he's still moving, he's still going forward, but I'll just kind of redirect him, and he goes straight into the master bedroom. He doesn't even remember what he was going into the bathroom for. He just kind of oh, I'm going here now, right? But the whole thing that started this was I was in the back. I don't remember I think this was after church one time. And I'm back there, and Isaiah, Eden and Daniel's child, if you know him, little Isaiah, he's running around in the back. And Isaiah, he starts running, and he's running straight towards the sound booth back there. There's some amps and stuff down there that, I don't know if they're amps, whatever Jeff has back there. There's some stuff down below. And Isaiah's booking it for the knobs. He's going to play with the knobs, right? And all of a sudden, Eden, his mom, comes up and just moves his shoulders slightly. He's booking it straight for it, moves his shoulder slightly. He just shoots on by it into someone else's arms, right? He was so focused on it, but just a little bit of redirection. All of a sudden, he's somewhere completely different. And I think sometimes God does that with us, right? And that's the funny thing about redirection, is it can be really simple. It can be super simple. But if we're not redirected, we get into places that really will destroy our lives or will cause us to destroy other things. And that can be really a problem. So God sometimes it's a little bit of redirection that he pulls us out of that. And I think some of this stuff is, we may be avoiding things in our life. This happens all the time. You may be avoiding something in your life, but then God redirects you back to dealing with it all over again because you always stopped trying. You prevented yourself from going back. Sometimes you may be perpetuating a broken relationship or a broken marriage or whatever it is through selfishness. Then God has to redirect you into sacrificing your entire life for your spouse or for this person that you're in a relationship with. You may be falling farther away from your relationship with God, so God redirects you back into more reliance on him. And God does this because he knows that, and we don't see it, because a lot of the times we get into these places where we're pretty certain that we know exactly where we're going, what we want to do. We've been here for years. We've done this for years. We've been in this job. We've been doing this. We've done it this way. I've gone to church this many times and do this, all this. We have all of these things that we do, but then God all of a sudden just decides, hey, I'm going to pull you out of your path. And it's kind of like what we end up doing is we end up driving on a path so long we build ruts, right? And all of a sudden you get these ruts, and then God all of a sudden has to turn the wheel, pull you out of the rut, and it's a real bumpy ride. And that's the problem with redirection, is redirection by God can be a really frustrating, tough, fearful thing in our lives. And yet God does it, and he does it a lot. And that's what has been, perplexing me recently, is because redirection by God is not so much with the intention of, listen, you're going to mess your life up, so I'm going to move you in another direction. Sometimes it's you're just kind of existing. You're not destroying your life, but you're not really living your life. Or you're doing good stuff, but you're not really living up to the calling that I could have you accomplish. And so redirection is this difficult thing that we start to process through, that we've experienced and may continue to experience. And now we have to process, well, how do I do this? How do I deal with this when I feel like I'm being redirected, especially by God? And there's this guy named Jacob in the Bible, and we're in Genesis 31 is where we start. And Genesis 31 is, we meet Jacob a while into his story. So this guy named Jacob, his grandfather was a guy named Abraham. God said to Abraham, listen, I'm going to bless you so that you can bless the world. And the way I'm going to bless you is I'm going to allow you to have a child, even though you're like 90 years old. You're going to have a child, and you're going to make a great nation. And so he does this with Abraham. Well, Abraham has Isaac. Isaac has two boys, Jacob and Esau. Now, they were twins. And what's so funny about our world today is if you have twins, one twin will always have over the other, I was born a minute and a half before you type of thing, right? That's probably the worst of what you get as the younger twin. The problem was in this society that the firstborn was the first in line to the most inheritance to the blessing. Now, the blessing was super important. The blessing, it sounds weird, but a blessing from a father in this culture is saying, like, listen, I'm going to bless you with everything God has blessed me with. You're going to continue doing things. Like, this was really important for them. And if you were the firstborn, you got all of that. And if you were the secondborn, you didn't get any of it. So literally a couple seconds, a couple minutes is what's separating Jacob, who was born second, from being all of that. So Esau comes out, Jacob's grabbing his heel. So guess what they named Jacob? Heel grabber. That's what Jacob means, is heel grabber. You grabbed your brother's heel on the way out. And so Jacob is literally named and born into an inferiority complex where he wants to be what he's not. And it gets even worse because Esau is like this manly man. He says he's got red hair all over him. He would go out and he'd hunt. He was this big guy. He did all of this stuff. That's who Esau was. That's who Jacob's older brother was. Now, Jacob is the opposite of everything that Esau is. Jacob doesn't have the muscles. He prefers cooking and doing the laundry and staying at home more than he prefers going out to hunt. He is just completely different than Esau. And on top of that, Esau, who is this manly man, like this guy who's obviously got it all together, and he's everybody looks up to him, and he's also getting the birthright, and he's also getting the inheritance, and he's also getting all this stuff. So you have Jacob, who was born like a minute and a half later maybe. That's all that separated him from being that guy. So he's born into this inferiority complex where he wants to be what he's not. And that literally affects the rest of his life. Like, we look at Jacob and we wonder, oh, why does he do some of the things he does if you know the story? But it's literally because he is always scratching and clawing to be more than he is in the eyes of people around him. He's always trying to make more money, do more things than anyone ever thought he could do. And that's his motivation in life. And so when we come to this point where his brother is going to get the blessing and the inheritance from their father who is blind. And he's old and he's about to die. So the father says to Esau, this older brother, he says, listen, go out, go hunt something, bring me the food, I'll give you the blessing. Jacob's mom hears it, tells Jacob. Jacob goes in, convinces his father that he's Esau, gets the blessing, and then he leaves. And Esau comes back and finds out, I can't even believe that you did this to me. So what Esau does, he says, as long as my father is alive, I won't do anything to Jacob, but as soon as he dies, I'm going to kill Jacob. So Jacob is like, well, I could die or I could not. So let's leave. And what his father and mother say to him is, go to the land of your mother's family. So Jacob leaves, and he goes and he finds his uncle. And his uncle has this beautiful daughter. And Jacob sees her, falls in love with her, says, I want to marry her. Says to his uncle, listen, I will work 7 years for this woman, okay? 7 years for this woman. My wife and I got married after knowing each other for 3. Was it 2 or 3? There's 3. There's something. I don't even remember. 2.5? It wasn't 7. That's my point. It wasn't like 7 years. I will work for this woman for 7 years. Because Jacob had nothing. Generally in that culture, when you get married, you give a dowry. right? But he had nothing to give, so he worked for 7 years for this woman. Well, guess what happens? He gets married to this woman, or so he thought. He wakes up in the morning, right? Because they would wear veils. Women would wear veils in that time. He wakes up in the morning, it's her older sister. Hold up, let's just pump the brakes real quick. What just happened? He goes to Laban, his uncle, says, why did you do this to me? Well, Laban, he's got the dumbest excuse. Well, it's not custom for the younger to get married before the older. And so he's like, so I tricked you into marrying the older. Then he's like, don't worry, I'll give you the one you want too, but just work another 7 years for me, right? So Jacob is so in love with Rachel, he does it. Now he didn't have to wait another 7 years to marry her. He got married to her, but then had to work another 7 years to pay it off. But now he's in this place where he's been working for approximately 14 years. And now he's actually grown in his wealth because he's done so well taking care of Laban's flocks and taking care of the household and all this stuff that he's actually grown in wealth. Now he actually has kids. He's got like, I'm not sure at this point. I think he has about 10 to 11 kids at this point. He's grown. His family has grown. His flocks have grown. All this stuff. Now Jacob is at this place where we see this in verse 31. It says, now Jacob heard, this is chapter 31, verse 1. Sorry. Chapter 31, verse 1. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban, his uncle, were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what our father has, he has gained all his wealth. And then verse 2, and Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. So now Jacob's in this weird place where he's gained all this stuff, seemingly honestly, but everybody's looking at him saying, yeah, everything you are is because you've kind of manipulated it from our father. And then he notices that his father-in-law doesn't like him as much as he used to. And because he's jealous, it's the connotation is that Jacob has almost increased past his father-in-law in his ability and his wealth. So now Jacob's in this weird place where it's like, I don't know what to do. And this is where God shows up in his life again. And I've skipped a lot of his story. God's been in his life before, but God shows up again in this place in verse 31, chapter 31, verse 3. It says, then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. And what this sounds like is, hey, listen, go back home, right? But it's not that. While it is go back to where you were born, it's not go back home, because where Jacob is right now, he spent 14 years there. His entire family is from there. He's gained all this wealth there. That's home. Where he is currently is home. So when God says go back home, he's like, I don't want to go there. My brother wants to kill me. But God's like, no, go back home. I will be with you. I will be with you. I think Jacob seems to be, at least he seems to be an avoider. He's always avoiding his issues. The reason he got to the place where he is because of his inferiority complex. He's always trying to be more than he is. So that's why he steals his brother's blessing. He's trying to be the oldest because he never got to be. But then he leaves, right? Now he's with Laban, and now he's outdoing Laban, right? Because he got there with nothing, and now he's outdoing him. And so he's in this place where he's not dealt with his issues. He's not dealt with the fact that he's got this inferiority complex. He's just avoiding it. And God's like, hey, listen, I'm doing two things now. I promised your grandfather you're going to turn into a great nation, but also you're not going to be able to do that as long as you're always just trying to outdo everybody else and not just resting in who you are in me. And so he says, listen, I need you to go back. So what God does to Jacob is he does this. He says, you're going to leave the land, but you're also going to have to face yourself. You're going to leave a land, but where you're going isn't necessarily a destination. It's a facing of yourself. So he leaves. And that sometimes happens to us. Like, I think a lot of the times we see there's a certain way I've been living. There's a certain way I've been doing things. And now God is forcing me into confronting it. You see this all the time where someone, maybe this is you, you've been a leader for your entire life, and now God is kind of forcing you to be that servant. And you don't know what to do with it, right? Maybe you've been coming to church and God's like, maybe instead of being seated, you need to be a servant. Maybe instead of being seated, you need to be a servant. And it's tough because what happens is we get in these places where it's just like, I've been doing it this way for this many years. I've been in this job for this many years. This is what I do every day. This is my routine. This is my cycle. This is my life. This is what I want to do. This is where I'm going. At least when I'm here, I know exactly what's coming at the end of the day. I know what's coming in the future. I know what promotion I'm going to get. I know what I'm going to be doing in 4 years. You know, like that's the stability that we desire. And yet God is saying, listen, I'm going to pull you out of a place that feels like it's been fruitful. I'm going to pull you out of a place that feels like it's been productive, that it's been good to you, and I'm going to make you go a different direction. And that's the hardest part about being redirected. Sometimes it's easy because you're like, oh, I never wanted to go there in the first place, so I'm glad I'm over here. But most often it's, everything's going great. Why are you messing it up, God? Like everything is where I wanted it to be. Why are you messing it up now? And this is a statement I think is super important, is that what God tends to do with us, he says, just because it's been productive doesn't mean that it should be permanent. Just because it's been productive doesn't mean it should be permanent. For Jacob, he's got this life that's incredibly productive for him. I mean, he's gained a whole entire family, all this wealth. It's been productive to him, and God's like, go back to the place where you might die. But just because it's been productive doesn't mean that it's permanent. And that doesn't necessarily go for huge things in your life. It may just simply be a way that you interact with people. It may be a way that you treat people. It may be a way that you take care of your finances. But it may be bigger. It may go into your job. It may go into the way you're planning for your retirement. It may go into so many things in your life. And that's the reality of it, is that God's saying, listen, just because it's been productive all of these years doesn't mean that you should keep doing it. There's a guy, George Washington Carver. You've probably heard of him. He's the guy who took the peanut and made it useful. And but the problem was, George Washington Carver, he got a master's in botany when he was in college, and he went to Tuskegee Institute and saw that what was happening in the crops around, especially with the poor farmers in the South, was they were planting cotton constantly because that's what their economy was based around. Right? They're growing cotton after cotton after cotton after cotton. They're just doing that for years. And their economy is based on it. Like that was their biggest export. That's what they did. Like this is if there's a definition of entrenched, this is it. But George Washington Carver notices to get all these poor farmers, I want to help them. And so what the problem with cotton is that it pulls nitrogen out of the soil. So it pulls nitrogen out. Over time, the cotton production just drops and drops and drops and drops. But then, George Washington Carver comes along and says, hey, listen, I got a solution for your low production. I want you to plant beans and peas because they restore nitrogen to the soil. Well, let's do it. No, let's not do it, because if we do that, no one's going to buy our beans and our peas. Our economy isn't based on this. This isn't going to work. This is dumb. That was the reaction of so many people. When they finally started doing it, within 2 or 3 years after planting different crops in their cotton fields, 2 or 3 years later, they plant cotton again. 4 to 5 times the production rate that they had previously. But nobody wanted to be redirected. Because to be redirected means that now I have to exit my comfort zone, because this has been productive and this is fruitful and this is at least doing something. And if I do this, it may not be the same. But you get called out of that into a new way. So God will redirect us from these places that are fruitful into better places. But then we get into this next thing. And this is the hardest one of the entire thing. Because it can be frustrating. God, this has been good. Why are you pulling me out of it? But then we get to this next part. And it's this. This is scary. God doesn't care about your stability. And as we start to get into this, you realize, because we go to Genesis 32, and this is what happens. Between what we see in Genesis 31 and in Genesis 32, we see this, that Jacob has now left. He leaves. He just ditches. He doesn't even tell Laban. He just leaves, right? After he leaves, on the way, his wife steals some of the gods from the house, like these idols from her father's house. Laban's really mad, so he chases after him and searches their entire camp. Rachel, the wife, sat on the idols, like under something, and said, I'm in the time of the month, so I can't get up. And that way, they didn't find the idols. Excuses. Anyways, so after this, Laban and Jacob form a truce. This is your land, this is my land. But Jacob is now finally, he's done with that. But now he's in this place, and we see this in Genesis 32:11, where he has sent servants to talk to Esau and tell him that he's there. The servants come back and say, hey, Esau's coming with 400 men. 400 men. I mean, if we're talking overkill here, that's overkill. Jacob has 12 sons at this point, most of them young. He has a few servants, and he has his wives and their servants. That's what he has. 400 guys is completely unnecessary. But he's at this place where now he's left. He's followed God. He's been redirected by God. Now he's in this place of like, this isn't good. Genesis 32:11 says, this is his prayer. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me, the mothers and the children. So Jacob is now in this place where it's like, God, you moved me in this direction, but now I might die. And the crazy part about God and his redirecting of our lives is that it doesn't cause stability. It doesn't cause stability. See, stability is when we have this way where I know what's going to come. I know what's coming next. I have things prepared. I know what I do. Everything is comfortable. That's stability. God doesn't bring stability to your life. If that's the definition of stability, God doesn't bring stability to your life. You want to hear some of the calls for these people in the Bible? So David, this guy David, God says, hey, listen, you're going to be king of a nation. Oh, by the way, you're going to spend years not sure if you're going to be alive the next day or not because the king is trying to kill you. Okay? Like, that first sounds good. Like, God, wow, I went from being a shepherd to now I'm going to be king. But then he spends years running away, not sure if he's going to be alive tomorrow. Right? Abraham, this is Jacob's grandfather. You're going to make a great nation. You're going to make an incredibly great nation, but you're going to have to leave home and everything you know in order to do it. Moses, you're going to deliver a people that have been in slavery for 400 years, but the people that you're trying to deliver them from, they're going to try and kill you. And when you get them out of slavery, the people you delivered aren't going to like you. Like, they're going to fight against you the whole time. Elijah, you're going to bring an entire nation back to God. But the entire time, the king of the nation is going to say, you're fighting me, I'm going to try and kill you. You're going to have to go hide someplace where crows are going to provide your food. You're going to have to go into places you never wanted to go. Esther, you're going to save your entire people. You're in captivity, people want to kill your people. You're going to save your entire people, but you're going to have to appear before a king that could kill you if you didn't wanted to, if he didn't like you, right? Paul, and this is my favorite one, Paul, this missionary, you're going to go tell the world about God, but they're going to beat you within inches of your life. You're going to be shipwrecked. Your own people will hate you. You're going to be blind for a bit, and you're going to get executed. If you want stability, God is not your guy. But that's the process of growth, is that, well, let me put it this way. Jacob left a situation that was safe. And this is important. Jacob left a situation that was safe. It wasn't a good situation, but it was safe. Jacob's in this place where he knows what's coming tomorrow. He's growing, stuff is going well for him, except it's not a good situation because everybody hates him, and there might be bad things in his future, but it's safe. But God pulls him out of a safe circumstance so that he could get killed by his brother. And that's what it feels like so often when all of a sudden God switches direction in our life or calls us into new places we're not used to going. Is it's like, God, I was safe back there. Now I'm in this place where everything's uncertain, everything's up in the air. It feels like everything is going wrong. And you see, there's like your money may be in your control, but now God is redirecting you, calling you to maybe give 10% of it. Well, your money was in your control, but it's not really in your control. You're massively in debt and you don't know what you're doing with it. But then now you're calling me to give 10% of my money. You can't do this to me because now I'm going to even be more uncertain about what's happening with my money. You may have control of your time, but God's calling you to serve. So now what are you going to do? Right? I never had any time, but now you're calling me into a place where I have less time. God redirects us from places that are safe because everything is, at least we know what it's, they're not good, but they're safe. And then he calls us into places that feel worse. But that's the reality of growth, is that what growth is, let me put it this way, what growth is something new is introduced to your life. And now you have to reconcile your worldview with this new thing. And what it causes is stretching. It causes stretching. It causes this pulling in your life. And if you don't get pulled into that instability, you don't grow. Our world today is literally one camp saying, this is what I believe, and if you believe differently than me, you're awful. And the other camp saying, I believe this, and if you believe differently than me, you're awful. And what we have is two people who aren't growing, who claim, I've grown to this height all of a sudden, that I'm way above this side, and the other side is saying the same thing, but neither side is growing. Because we're not willing to hear what people around us actually have to say. So what God is doing in these people's lives, in Jacob's life, and maybe in your life, is He's pulling you out of the stability so that you can be stretched and you can be pulled into places where you actually grow. If there is no stretching, if there is no instability, you don't grow. The entirety of college is, let me mess with your worldview. Let me mess with your idea of the world so that you can actually come out with a better one. So God pulls Jacob out of stability, out of a place that's safe but not good, so that he can go to a better place where God can actually fulfill His calling through him. But now we have this instability. So now we've established two things. That makes it sound awful. First off, God will pull you out of really productive places in your life. This is going great. God's going to pull you out of it. And then when He does pull you out of it, it's going to be really unstable. Don't you really want to go? Like, don't you really want to get redirected by God right now? Like, don't you want God to just call you into something? But this is where the rubber hits the road. And that we see these two things, and those are two really important things, because if we don't see that, then all of a sudden, when everything is going wrong around us, we feel like God isn't working. But what if when everything is going wrong around you, that's when God is working the most? Because now He's actually able to build something in you. And this is where we come to this last part. Is that redirection, when you're being redirected by God, one of His main intentions is to make your faith stronger. And we see this because we just read this one verse of chapter 32. But let's read 9 through 12. Again, it says, Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. Then verse 10, I am not worthy of the least of all of the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed the Jordan, and now I have become two camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him. And that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But then verse 12, but you said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. What Jacob does here is this really incredible thing of when you're in the midst of trial, in the midst of the redirection of God in your life. This is what you do. And the first thing he does is he's brutally honest with God. And he actually kind of throws everything back in God's face and says, hey, listen, I'm going to say some stuff to you. And so this is in verse 9. He says, and Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred that I may do you good. What Jacob does, he says, listen, this is your fault. Like I wouldn't be here if you hadn't told me to come here. So you told me to leave that place, and now I'm in a place that's worse. This is on you. And that's really important because I think that what happens so often is when we get into these places where it feels like everything's gone wrong, God hasn't been answering our prayers, things are going worse than we ever thought they would. We get into this place where we're mad at God, but we won't really tell Him. We have these Christian prayers, I've seen this all the time, I've done this myself. God, I don't know what's happening right now, but I trust you, right? And that can be said very genuinely. But often I've said, I trust you. And I don't really trust him. I'm really ticked off at him. I really want to say some things to him. But I won't say it because, well, God is big. I guess He knows what He's doing. But I don't really trust it in my heart. And I want things to go differently. And when we hide our feelings from God, guess what happens? We suppress them, and it causes distance between us and God. Not between God and us. God doesn't get any farther away from us. We push ourselves away from Him. Because when you suppress your feelings, for those of you who are married, I know you know this, when you suppress your feelings, you don't get closer, you get farther apart. Sometimes you suppress your feelings for the sake of the relationship, but instead of getting closer to each other, you get farther apart. And that's the same thing with God. is when we suppress the things in our lives, when we aren't honest with Him about just how frustrated we are with the fact that we were someplace good and now we're all of a sudden all messed up. We suppress our feelings and we push God away. I still remember there was this one period in my life, I'm going to tell the story real quick, that there was this girl I was like in love with. I'm going to marry this girl, but we had broken up, and now it's like a year later, we were talking again, and I was certain. I was like, hey, God, I just want this girl to commit. She would never commit. I want this girl to commit. I talked to her. She finally said everything I wanted her to say. I've been praying for months. I'm just like, God, I want this. I've been praying for months. I was working at camp that summer, and on my way back to camp after talking with her, I still remember I was on this really lonely road leading right up to camp, and I just felt so mad because here I had gotten everything I had prayed for, and I felt so unsatisfied. And I was ticked off because I was pretty certain the way she said it, she wasn't really in. And that though she wanted to be in, I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how this is going to go. This doesn't feel any better. And I was so mad at God, and I'm really dumbing it down because I don't even know if I could explain everything I was feeling. And I get to camp, and of course, we're having communion. We're having like this moment where it's this really intimate, like, let's talk about everything. Let's have bread and juice, and we're like, let's talk, and let's express to God. And I'm just ticked, right? So I leave, like right in the middle of it, I duck out, and I go out to some abandoned place on camp. I started yelling at God more than I've ever had. And in the spirit of full disclosure, I was cussing God out. I was just like, God, there's so many things that are so frustrating about this. And I was yelling words at him I never say in public. And I was so mad. And you know what's crazy? My problem, this whole circumstance didn't get sorted out until 4 months later when finally God kind of started to take away my feelings for this girl. But guess what I felt after that moment? I felt closer to God than I had in a really long time. Even though I'd been praying about this circumstance for months and it finally got answered, it wasn't until I vented at God and beat on Him with everything that I had that I realized that He was big enough to take it all. And that I didn't have to hide it from Him because He already knew it. It was just me hiding it from Him. And so when I did that, and the honesty all of a sudden let me be closer to Him. And that's what Jacob does. He says, listen, you're the reason I'm here. You're the reason I'm in a place where I could die. But then he does something. He says, you said this. But then he does this next thing. Genesis 32 verse 10, he says, I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you've shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed the Jordan, and now I've become two camps. Jacob in his fear, he's like, if Esau attacks one camp, then he won't attack the other one because he split the two. But he's like, I crossed the Jordan River. I crossed this river with a staff. And now I have more than I could ever imagine. What Jacob does is first he's super honest with God, but then he chooses to remember what God has already done. And here's the problem, is both of those are absolutely necessary. If I come to this place where I'm completely honest with God, but I don't remember what He's done for me, or I don't choose to rest in that, I come to this place where I'm really bitter with God. Because all of a sudden, I've expressed to you just how angry I am with being here, but now I have no faith that you have taken care of me and will continue to. But on the other side, if I don't express everything to God and I'm just like, God, you've done all these things for me, right? Then I get to this place where I still suppress my feelings, and though I may remember what He's done, I still keep Him at arm's length because I have so much bitterness towards Him in my heart. So Jacob does both. He says, God, I'm frustrated, I'm ticked off, and I don't know why you would have pulled me out of the fruitful place to go into the place where I'm about to die, but I have seen you do things for me. And for some reason, I'm here in the same place that I left, and yet I have so much more than what I left with. So he remembers what God has done for him. But the last thing he does is probably the most important one, and it's in verse 12. He says, but you said, and this is something we can do in life, especially in the redirection, but through trial, through whatever it is, but you said. And when I say the words, but you said, what I'm saying is that what I'm seeing and everything I'm experiencing says something else, but you say something different. And he says, but you said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. The last thing that Jacob does is he claims the promise of God. And it wasn't even God's promise to him. It was God's promise to his grandfather. But if he can use the promise that God gave to his grandfather, I'm pretty sure I can believe in the promises God has given to him. And in the Old Testament and to the New Testament, these people 2,000, 4,000 years ago, I can believe the promises God gave to them because God still loves me. And so Jacob calls on the promise. So first he's like, God, I'm going to be real honest about this. I don't like this redirection. I don't like this place that you've taken me, but I remember what you've done, and now I'm going to believe that you're going to continue to be that faithful. Faith is built on what God has done. It's built on what God has done. But it doesn't grow unless you believe He can do more. And there's so often where I get stuck in these places of God has done this much, and that's how big my faith is. But God's like, let me just break that open. Let me force you into places where you have to say, okay, He did this much, but I'm going to believe Him for the next much. And when He breaks you into those places, you now can believe God infinitely more. Every circumstance is not an opportunity for you to get beat down. It's an opportunity for your faith to grow to the place where now God is so much bigger than your circumstance. So what He does is He pulls you out of places that feel like they're really productive. And like I said, they feel like they're really productive. We can get into places that are really unhealthy but feel like they're really productive. We're constantly pushing people away because it's like, I'm protecting myself. It feels safe, but it's not. And so God pulls you out of that. It can be substance abuse. It could be anything in your lives where God is pulling you out because it felt good, but it wasn't really good for you. But then when you get pulled out, you don't hit stability all of a sudden. You hit your life being thrown into chaos. And it's God working in the midst of that saying, listen, yes, it feels like chaos, and yes, you need to be honest with me, but remember what I did. And now believe that the God who did all of that for you hasn't changed. That if His love for you remained the same back then, what could have changed it now? Redirection by God is not with the purpose of, let me just mess up your life so your faith can get bigger. Redirection by God involves like, you might destroy your life if you keep going that way. But one of the main reasons I think God does it, one of the biggest reasons is, I want to build your faith. I want to build your faith. Because if your faith isn't built, then what do you have? You only have you. And I don't want to just have me. I don't know if you see this, but Jacob, he's this guy who his whole life he was trying to just have him. He was trying to work his way up to these places where he could just be self-sufficient, where he could have everything that he wanted to have, but then God pulls him out of that into a place where now guess what we're saying? We're talking about the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. There's a pastor who says this. He says, God changed Jacob's name. If you don't know that, God changes Jacob's name to Israel. But then, and Israel is this, it means the one who prevails with God. It's a sign of victory, the word Israel. But guess how people throughout Scripture still refer to God? The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Why would they not use Israel? Why not the God of Abraham and Isaac and then that one guy who prevailed with God? Why do they still use the name heel grabber? Because that was his weakness. That was his messed up part of himself. Why did they keep referring to the God of that guy? That's because God isn't just a God of your victories. God is a God of where you are now. I didn't say that. That was a different pastor, Steve Furtick. Amazing sermon. You need to listen to it. But that is an amazing thing about this story, is that God redirects Jacob, and that though he becomes a man who prevails with God, God is still the God of even when he was a failure. And that's what you can believe in today, that in the midst of the redirection, it's going to feel like chaos. But you can believe in what He's done, and continue to believe in what He's going to do, and yet in the midst of it, you can be honest with Him the whole time. So in closing, I don't know what God's doing in your life. I don't even know what God's doing in my life, because that's sometimes the chaos we get thrown into. I don't really have a direction. I don't know what I'm doing. Thanks, God. But I know what I can believe in, and God delivered me out of being a 12-year-old kid going through parental strife. I don't know how I even became a pastor. I don't know how I became to this place where I can say God is victorious in our lives. I don't know how I can say that, but I can believe that he's going to continue to do that in my life, and you can do the same for all of your circumstances. So no matter the redirection, remember the God who is your foundation. want to thank you so much for who you are. That there is nothing that could separate us from you. That there is nothing in this world that could change how you feel about us. And God, I know that there's some of us who are going through these redirection periods in our life where things were going a certain way, and they may have been good, but now all of a sudden we're in places where everything seems to be up in the air and nothing seems to be stable or certain. But God, help us to know that in the midst of all of that, that is where you're working the most. It's in those places where everything is broken around us that you get to create exactly what needs to be created. And that though we may feel like this window, this piece of glass has been broken, Lord, we can be built into the most beautiful piece of stained glass that anyone's ever seen. And so just help us to continue to believe that you are capable of doing what you say you're capable of doing. If you promise that you have plans to prosper us and not to harm us, plans to give us hope in the future, then we want to believe that. If you said that nothing in this world could separate us from you, not even angels or demons or life or death could separate us from you, Lord, then I want to believe that today. I want to remember what you've done for me. I want to take some moments in this week, in the busyness of it all, to say, yeah, God, you have done things for me. And I want to go back and remember them, and I want to claim those things, that God, that you came through back then so that I could be where I'm at today. But where I'm at today is not where you want me to be forever. And so I want to believe you for the next thing, no matter if it's now or if it's coming or whatever it is. So just help us to believe in what you've done and continue to believe in what you're going to do. Help us to remember that the instability is not you not working in our lives, but help us to recognize that this is actually the moment where you work the most. Help us to realize that places may feel safe, but that doesn't mean they're good. And just continue to guide us in this journey that we call life. Continue to show us who you are, and continue to build in us a spirit that seeks to bring others into this joy that we have found. In your name, amen. Thanks for coming, everybody. Happy Sabbath. Remember, next week we're starting a 2-part series on silence. So if that's been a question for you, if you've been dealing with that, then we're excited to see you next week, and we start processing that. So have a great Sabbath, and we'll see you next week.